But I don't think they realized James Harden was as good as he is now, right?
That's correct. To be fair, I don't know if anyone did. We put all our assets in to trade for him, but no one could anticipate he'd be the best player in the world. Like,
why did you put all your assets? Why him?
So both the eye test, because he looks amazing. I think anyone would watch him, but if you looked at data at the time, once he had the ball in his hands, and it's still true to this day, and I get a lot of shit because someone asked me who's a better scorer, him or Michael Jordan, and it's just factual that James Harden is a better scorer than Michael Jordan.
Based on the math.
Based on literally, like, you give James Harden the ball, and before you're giving up the ball, how many points do you generate, which is how you should measure offense. James Harden is by far number one in NBA history, and he was number one even at the Oklahoma City Thunder. He was coming off the bench. It was a little more hidden.
Yeah, I know. I think it's just as bizarre as the viewer watching this video thinks this title is. I mean, I thought we were past this. I thought this entire saga has ended, especially after last year when the Philadelphia 76ers had the opportunity to trade for James Harden, and unfortunately they failed. But this is a twist I really didn't expect, and there's multiple motivations as to why the Philadelphia 76ers would put this information out there, so we're gonna break it all down. Before we get to the content, just a reminder, we're giving away a follower on my Instagram page $500. We do this very frequently. All you have to do is follow me on IG to enter. In addition to that, we're giving away a subscriber that turns on our notifications on this channel, $500. Now that we got all that out of the way, cue the intro. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Yeah, guys, I know it's been a while since I've last come out with a video, and a while being 2 days, which, bear in mind, my apologies, I'm really consumed with trying to set up this brand new studio that I got. And currently, if it seems like a super bright mess, that's mainly because we don't even have curtains in this place. So I apologize if it's an eyesore. We have a ton of artwork going up on that wall, and I also want to hear your suggestions as to what else should go on that wall, because I personally suck at decorating. Now, the NBA trade deadline is right around the corner, and typically when the trade deadline is right around the corner, you begin to hear some absolutely absurd stuff. And probably one of the more bizarre rumors we've made a video on more recently is this report from Mark Stein saying that James Harden would be quote unquote open to relocation from the Brooklyn Nets. And at the time, I'm going to be honest, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, this is easily the best team James Harden has been a part of so far, with the best supporting cast that he's had so far. And if you take away some of the off the court issues like the Kyrie Irving vaccine debacle, which I honestly don't think is as bad as it was a few months ago, especially as people are starting to come around in regards to their stance on vaccinations and whatnot, and Kevin Durant's myriad of injuries, and of course James Harden's own problems with injuries and adjusting to the game today. But there's no team in not only the NBA but in any sport that doesn't have off the court or off the field issues. And typically overcoming those issues as a team is the difference between becoming a champion and not becoming a champion. Some teams have such crippling off the court issues that despite them being a championship contender, at least on paper, they end up falling significantly shorter than their expectations. I'm looking at you, Los Angeles Lakers. But in this instance, I don't think there's enough there for James Harden to say, I don't want to be on the Brooklyn Nets anymore. So when I originally heard that report, I said, okay, maybe Harden's putting that out there, or maybe Daryl Morey's camp is putting that out there, because we all know how Daryl Morey feels about James Harden. But then today we got this article from none other than Champ Charania and Sam Amick, two of my most favorite sources that I never question at all whatsoever. It doesn't get more credible than these two. And this is what the article says. With Ben Simmons' James Harden trade a hope worth waiting for, sources say that the Sixers prefer a summer deal, which is insane. It pretty much means that the Philadelphia 76ers are willing to punt on this season in order to potentially trade Ben Simmons for James Harden. Now, in order for this to happen, one, the Brooklyn Nets need to absolutely collapse in the playoffs. You know, like Kyrie Irving has to do something very Kyrie Irving-like that would drive James Harden crazy, which in the past we've seen that already happen. We've seen James Harden kind of roll his eyes at Kyrie Irving's antics. Whether that's warranted or justified or not, all we could say is it's definitely definitely happen, especially in training camp this year. But in addition to that, James Harden will have to potentially cause another ruckus like he did with the Houston Rockets when he wanted to get traded from the Rockets to the Brooklyn Nets. Now, here's what the article says. With the NBA trade deadline just over 2 weeks away, rival teams interested in three-time All-Star Ben Simmons believe Philadelphia 76ers president of basketball operations Daryl Morey has his sights set on a bigger target in the summertime: Brooklyn Nets star James Harden. It's like a man that can't get over his ex, but he and his ex broke up due to long distance, not so much due to the fact that they didn't want to be together. With Daryl Morey and James Harden, my opinion is the marriage would have continued if Daryl Morey was given a little bit more rope in Houston, if he was allowed to spend a little bit more, and if things went a different way, I think him and James Harden may potentially still be in Houston together. But in this instance, the breakup was primarily because Daryl Morey stepped down, James Harden wanted to move on, so did Russell Westbrook at the time, and then the Rockets brought in Raphael Stone, and now you have the Rockets the way they are. Now, the article continues to say that the 76ers continue to engage in trade talks around Ben Simmons, who requested a trade and informed the franchise in October that he is not mentally ready to play again for the franchise and needs professional help for his mental health. I'm not going to comment on that. You know, I really am not going to comment on that, because saying that you don't want to play basketball for 4 months because you're not mentally ready to get out of playing basketball, because if it is, then I'm not going to say it. Honestly, I'm not even going to give my take on it, because I know the Ben Simmons stans are going to be coming after me in the comment section, so I'm not even going to comment on it. And the article continues saying multiple sources, including people with direct knowledge of the team's thinking, and also from rival teams involved on the Simmons front, tell The Athletic that the 76ers are believed to prefer to wait in order to pursue Harden or another superstar in the offseason, and thus want to save Simmons for that potential sign-and trade rather than take what's available on the current market. That means the 76ers are willing to play the long game just to get James Harden, and to be honest, a trade of Ben Simmons for James Harden in asset sense makes a lot of sense, meaning I don't know if the Brooklyn Nets get significantly better by acquiring Ben Simmons for James Harden, but you gotta admit, man, going from a 32-year-old superstar to a 25-year-old former #1 overall pick that's made it to the All-Star game in 3 seasons doesn't really sound all too bad, especially when you have Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, who are already really good isolation players. I don't necessarily think James Harden is absolutely necessary for the team, and who knows, maybe Ben Simmons could add to the Brooklyn Nets defensively, and that could make a huge difference coming down the stretch during playoff time, especially if James Harden wants to leave anyway. Assuming James Harden wants to leave anyway. Now, the article continues to say that unless Philadelphia is blown away at the trade deadline by a team that significantly improves its current offer, in other words, the standstill between Simmons and the Sixers will continue past the deadline. There's belief that the offers currently available would be there in the offseason too, but what may not be if a Simmons deal is completed now is a shot at a star like Harden. Simmons entered this season with 4 years and $147 million remaining on his max contract. Now, I'm not exactly certain. I think the reason why Simmons is saying that he is not mentally ready to play is, I believe, and I'm not 100% sure about this, I'm going to do further research, but I believe that the Philadelphia 76ers don't have to pay him against their cap as a result of this situation. But I'm not exactly sure. If someone wants to check me in the comment section, I'd appreciate that, but I think I've heard that somewhere. Now, the article begins to bring up the most likely teams that Ben Simmons could be traded to, and some trade talks that have already been had. Like the Sacramento Kings and Atlanta Hawks have been among the most engaged recently in talks on Simmons, but team officials with those organizations doubt the 76ers will lower the price threshold for Simmons before February 10th. Between now and February 10th, the 76ers will continue taking calls and examining potential framework of offers presented to them. The Charlotte Hornets have been among new teams placing a Simmons inquiry to the 76ers, but there's been nothing substantive. In return for Ben Simmons, the 76ers have wanted a top-level all-star or a package featuring a bevy of first-round picks. This is true. This hasn't changed the entire year. I mean, Daryl Morey has had offers like Malcolm Brogdon and a first-round pick that he said no to. Hell, even recently, we've heard rumors that Jeremy Grant and Sadiq Bey and a couple of first-round picks from the Detroit Pistons were offered as well for Simmons, and the 76ers didn't really like the offer. So I believe this is consistent because the 76ers want an all-star and multiple first-round picks. They want Ben Simmons to be traded for like he's at the peak of his value, not necessarily as the player that we know him currently. Which again, if you're a team, and I've seen this so many times, if you're a team and you're acquiring a star and you want to trade that star, or hell, even a player that used to be a star, you don't want to just sit him on the bench the entire season. I know in the 76ers case, they didn't really have a choice, but you look at what happened to players like Chris Paul or even Jeremy Grant, where these players were bought at their lowest value possible. They then improved their stock on these teams and then were flipped for assets. That's typically the way. I don't really understand the logic of having John Wall sit out for the entire season, or Ben Simmons not wanting to come back to the 76ers to improve his trade value so he could get traded to a new team. As a result, Ben Simmons is pretty much in purgatory. He's not playing at all this year, and the 76ers aren't going to budge until they get a deal that's worth it for him. Now, for Simmons, the 76ers have asked the Kings for Tyrese Halliburton and multiple first-round picks. They asked for a package around John Collins and multiple first-round picks from the Hawks, along with Atlanta taking on Tobias Harris. Now, the Kings don't want to move De'Aaron Fox or Halliburton and want to build around them. I've heard this repeatedly. I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know if keeping Halliburton is going to be worth it in the long haul. It could, but this could also blow up in their face as well. Now, the article continues to say that the 76ers have discussed deals around players like De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, and Pascal Siakam, but organizationally they have felt that those players were not championship-altering perfect fits on the roster. The 76ers believe in Tyrese Maxey and already have Joel Embiid and Tobias Harris. The notion of Daryl Morey holding out hope for a Harden reunion should surprise no one who saw them thrive together during those 8 seasons together in Houston. It wasn't just the on-court success that created their bond, though. The perennial playoff appearances, including 2 Western Conference Finals, didn't hurt either. It was the way Morey empowered Harden like never before, hiring a coach in Mike D'Antoni whose system played so wonderfully to his strengths and building the roster around him throughout. And after Morey's failed attempt to pull it off last summer, when a deal that would have sent Ben Simmons to the Rockets was real enough that the Sixers point guard even started shopping for homes in the Houston area, it makes perfect sense that Morey would want to go down this familiar road again. This next part is probably my favorite because it's a shot at Dwight Howard, saying that especially considering the reality that Harden's never played with a big man as dynamic and dominant as Embiid. Man, the Dwight Howard disrespect, man. I mean, I guess he wasn't the player that he was in Houston, that he was with the Orlando Magic, especially considering the back issues he had with the Lakers. But come on, Shams, Sam, you guys are better than this. Now, it continues to say Brooklyn side of things, saying the Rockets moved Harden to the Nets a year ago, deciding between offers from Brooklyn and Philadelphia. The 76ers were close to acquiring Harden, proposing Simmons, Thibault, and 2 first-round picks. With both final offers in hand on the morning of January 13, 2021, Rockets owner Tillman Fertitta approached Harden about which destination he preferred, Brooklyn or Philadelphia. The choice was his, sort of. It remains unclear whether Fertitta would have been willing to follow through on the Sixers deal if Harden had opted for Philadelphia. At the same time, sources say that the Rockets also strongly preferred the Nets' proposal. The Sixers were unsure at the time if they were truly in the running, as Morey had abruptly resigned from the Rockets less than 3 months before and landed with the Sixers just 2 weeks later. They feared the personal dynamics relating to their recent history would play a part in the Rockets' final choice. The Rockets officials have denied that was the case. Bro, obviously they're gonna deny that's the case. What, you think Tillman Fertitta is gonna come out and say, I don't like Daryl Morey, so I didn't trade James Harden to him? Now, the article continues to say, as in the case with most potential free agent suitors, there are 2 primary ways the 76ers can bring in Harden in the offseason. One is signing him with cap space and negotiating a sign and trade with the Nets. However, the 76ers are roughly $20 million over the 2022 salary cap with just their fully guaranteed players and filling out the roster. So clearing enough space for Harden would require sending out $61 to $65 million in salary without taking any back, which is a big undertaking in any offseason, especially this one, where so few teams will wield space. That means a sign and trade involving Simmons and or Tobias Harris is the practical option, although the Nets would have to agree. Now, the crazy part is it's not only Daryl Morey that wants to do this. Sources say that Morey has full support of the ownership to take this situation beyond the deadline and into the summer, with the internal belief that they simply must prioritize Embiid's prime over the course of the next several years rather than act too quickly because of this season's stakes. Embiid is signed through the 2025 to 2026 season and has a player option worth $54 million in 2026 to 2027. What's more is Embiid also made it clear that he believes in this team's ability as currently constructed to contend for an Eastern Conference crown and perhaps even a championship. To wit, even with Embiid missing 11 games this season, the Sixers find themselves 2.5 games behind Brooklyn for the top spot in the East. So this is honestly, if you're a Sixers fan, this is exactly what you want to hear. Not the fact that the Sixers want to trade for James Harden, more the fact that the Sixers are not going to be trigger happy. They're going to take their time because even without Ben Simmons, they are literally neck and neck with the Brooklyn Nets for the top spot in the East. If I'm James Harden, probably the one thing I am looking at the most is Harden's role is definitely going to increase if he went from the Brooklyn Nets to the Philadelphia 76ers. The general manager of the Sixers has always prioritized Harden and made sure that he was in the best situation to succeed. And if you're James Harden, a part of you is kind of thinking, man, when I was with the Houston Rockets, I was averaging these bizarre statistics, and that's all because Daryl Morey thought that I was a better offensive player than Michael Jordan. Now, the article also says things like James Harden declined to sign a 3-year, $162 million extension with the Nets prior to the regular season, but that's kind of a formality. Typically, star players do that because if Harden opts into his player option, he is eligible for a 4-year, $227 million max extension, making it a total 5-year, $274.7 million contract. If Harden was to opt out and join a new team, he is eligible for a 4-year, $200 million max deal. I don't think money's the motivation for Harden at this point. I don't think he would mind giving up $70 million to go to a situation where he'd enjoy playing basketball at this point either. It's an absolutely bizarre scenario, but I don't think we'll really know how this is going to end until the conclusion of the season. If it ends ugly and there's some issues behind the scenes for the Brooklyn Nets, then yeah, Harden could go to the Philadelphia 76ers. Hell, I've seen players switch teams for way less reasons. When Jimmy Butler left the Philadelphia 76ers to join the Miami Heat, that kind of shocked some of us. Although, of course, if you're looking back at it now, it did seem to make sense, but at the exact time that it happened, we were kind of looking at Jimmy Butler and the Philadelphia 76ers kind of like, what the hell's wrong with you two? So let me know in the comment section down below, what do you think's going to happen? Do you think the Philadelphia 76ers are going to be able to trade for James Harden in the offseason? Do you think James Harden would even want to leave the Brooklyn Nets? Personally, I thought no, but I'm starting to warm up to the idea. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike. I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.